Let's take a look at how to use watercolor pencils. These might look like drawing supplies, but they are actually painting supplies. If you look a little bit closer, you'll see a picture of a paintbrush on the side. That's a good way to check if you are using a watercolor pencil or a regular colored pencil. If you don't see the paintbrush, it's a regular colored pencil. Please only use these for painting. If you make a drawing and you aren't planning on painting it later, use regular colored pencils, markers, or crayons to color it. We want to save these watercolor pencils for painting explorations, painting skill builders, or painting projects. Watercolor pencils are best for smaller details and coloring smaller spaces because they have a small point. If you are painting a large space on your paper, like a sunset sky for example, it's going to take you a long time to color all that space with a watercolor pencil. So for large areas, it might be best to just use regular paint for that and use these for smaller details. To use the pencils, you're going to color the same way that you would with a regular colored pencil. Fill in the entire space by coloring with the same amount of pressure the whole time you are coloring. The space should be filled evenly with color and it should look smooth when you're done. Then all you need is some water and a paintbrush, and when you apply the wet brush on top of the color, it turns into paint. Now I want to give you some helpful tips for how to use these. If you press hard in some areas, the color is going to be darker. If you press lightly, the color will be lighter. Also, you want to be sure to check for any white spaces or hard lines in your coloring. If the space is filled unevenly, that's going to show up when you go to paint it. See, look at those lines, we can still see through that. So make sure when you're coloring, your coloring is even and you fill the entire space. You'll also notice that when you add the water, the lightness or darkness of the color will change depending on how much pressure you used. So pressing harder with the colored pencil will give you a darker color when you add water. Pressing lightly with the colored pencil will give you a nice light color when you add the water. If you want to try blending colors, you can. You can create a color transition by placing colors next to each other. Then, when you apply the wet brush, the colors are naturally going to blend as a result of adding that water. You don't need a ton of water on your brush in order to make a color transition. Keeping a paper towel handy to dab your brush off when you need to is helpful. You can also mix by layering colors on top of each other. If you are mixing by layering, be sure to start with the lighter color first and use light pressure. You're going to build up that color little by little by adding a little bit of color at a time. Then when you add your brush, you will see the color mix together. Sometimes you might be layering colors and you accidentally put a lighter color on top of a darker color. If that happens, all you need to do is simply wipe off the mixed color with a paper towel and voila, it is clean. Also, if you need to sharpen a watercolor pencil, you can use the regular pencil sharpener for that. In addition to watercolor pencils, we also have watercolor crayons available in our painting center. These work pretty much exactly the same way as the watercolor pencils. The only difference is that they're a crayon instead of a pencil. So instead of using them for smaller sized spaces like the colored pencil, you can actually use them for medium-sized spaces. Something else to watch out for with the watercolor crayons is that they can get mixed much faster and much easier than a watercolor pencil. So be sure to check them often and wipe them clean if you are layering and color mixing. Another downside to watercolor crayons is that they cannot be sharpened. So once they lose their point, it's hard to get the point back again. That's why these work best for coloring in medium-sized spaces instead of small spaces. Watercolor crayons can also sometimes get on your hands if you're not careful, or if the crayon doesn't have a wrapper on it. So just be aware of that if you're using the watercolor crayons.